Hey there, everybody. Welcome back. Thanks for clicking on the video. Make sure to, like if you like it and subscribe if you want to see some more of me in your life. Today we're going to get into 90 Day Fiancé the Other Way, Season 5, Episode 6, Who's the Bossiest? This was actually a shorter episode. I think it had something to do with the Last Chance show being so long. So this one won't be too long, but we're going to still discuss it. I'm going to go ahead and start off with Wayne and Holly. They're still in the dress shop. He's just like standing there creepily outside the dressing room like a helicopter. She's telling her mom how she's just upset and she's like gonna cry. And he's just, still out there hovering. And she tells her mom, like, did you hear what he said? He said I dress like a prostitute. The mom is like, he used the wrong word. He didn't mean it. She's just like, okay. And then walks out and like just literally like falls into his arms. Like, I felt like she was collapsing. She looks just like sickly. He says he's sorry. He didn't mean it. It just came out wrong. The mom is like, I'm out of here. That's enough of that for me. Then he like crouches down on his knee to tell her he's sorry. And, he knows that she's upset. But that's just not how he meant it. That is how he meant it. He said it like twice. So they are together. They have a sit-down interview. And she tells him that what he said like was humiliating to her. And while she's talking, I noticed that she's like nervously turning a ring on like a certain finger, I'm pretty sure. So, pretty sure they get married. Let me know if you guys noticed. But anyways, he just says, that's what people think when they see short dresses. She's like, you're supposed to be my biggest ally here, and she just feels betrayed and hurt. All he cares about is her safety. And so, he's like, you don't have to change your clothes right away. You could just do it in moderation. So for now, he's allowing her to, wear what she wants and what she feels comfortable in. So she's like, yeah, okay. And he gives her a hug. Then we get to the next day. They're in the car and she's just asking him why they're losing power so much. He tells her, because it's South Africa and she's just getting tired of never having power. Voiceover Holly says that she was really upset by his comment, but it's hard to stay mad at him when he apologized to her and, she stood up for herself and told him that he can't talk to her like that. But, it turns out that they're headed to a self-defense course. And I feel like I predicted that. I'm pretty sure I said, why doesn't she do something like self-defense instead of worrying about her dress? So, they listened to me. Wayne, he says he's disappointed in himself because he really screwed up. What he said in the store, he screwed up. So, she gave up a lot to be with him. And he just decided to leave like her dress thing until after they get married. Because he just wants her to be happy. What's with all these people saving the issues for after they get married? Is that a common practice? So he says, he's taking her to self-defense class because it might help her if she's in trouble. Like, yeah, see, this will help her safety. She meets the instructor and he says that the kind of self-defense he teaches is more reality-based. Like, he's not going to teach her to disarm someone with a gun or a knife because it's just not realistic. So they're going to work on how to, like, if someone comes up behind and tries to choke them, to, like, get them down and run away. He said if someone comes up behind you and grabs you around the neck, first thing you do is grab the elbows and the wrist, and you turn your head and look down into the gap, and then turn out and flip them on the ground and run. So everybody remember that. We're going to learn today. So Holly practices. She tries to take this big guy down, and she ends up like falling herself. But they keep trying. And the second and the third time she got him down. Wayne says that he was very impressed, and he didn't know such like a small girl could flip over such a big guy. And, he's like, well, I'm thinking she's such a petite girl, this could be good for her. By the way, he's talking to the instructor as if, like, he's her dad. Like, none of them are talking to her. They always treat Holly like this, like, she just can't make decisions or something. The instructor says the nice thing about jiu-jitsu is it's designed for a small person to take down a big person. And he's like, well, yeah, this will work if she's taking down one person, but what if, like, 5 break in? And she's like, well, obviously I can't take out 5 people. But, like, if she goes jogging at night, she used to like jogging at night. And if someone would have come up to her, she wouldn't know what to do. So she does feel like she learned a lot. She tells him she knows that he's protective, but when is he going to see her as capable enough to, like, jog alone? And he's like, 6 months to a year, maybe. When she learns to be safe and how things are done around there and is more aware of her surroundings, then he can let her out of her cage. It's like, okay, daddy. Like, what do you mean? So, she's never going to get there. Like, she's never going to get independent. She's never going to learn these things if she's locked in a cage. But again, he's just trying to keep her safe. And, like, they're just protective of their women over there. So, later we catch up to them, and Holly's wearing a very short, low-cut blue dress. And he goes, oh, you look real pretty, babe. And I'm thinking, like, okay, someone is sucking up, right? She's like, yeah, it's really hard to get ready without power. It's like living like an animal. And I was going to say it's like living like a pilgrim, because that's what I say. Like, I don't think it's cool to, like, say it's like living like an animal when the whole country lives that way, But I was going to say she's living like a pilgrim. I thought that was funny. So he's like, yeah, load shedding has been a nightmare. And she's like, yeah, well, anyways, you know how, like, sometimes I get great ideas. And she looks all excited to tell him something. And he's like, yeah, okay, spill the beans, what's up? And she's like, oh, I booked us some places to look at to move. And he's like, yay. He looks down for a really long time. And then they go into Holly's voiceover, and she's like, yeah, this self-defense class was really helpful, but she isn't comfortable, she doesn't feel safe like she did in America. And the house in South Africa has been broken into 3 times. She doesn't think that, it's ever going to feel like home there, especially if she lives in the home that they're in now. So she asked him if he wants to go. And he's like, yeah, we spoke about this. And she's like, yeah, I know. But, like, her and her mom don't feel safe. And they feel like they're in a horror movie. Because it's just been broken into so much. And they hear noises and things like that. He's getting defensive immediately. Like, he's, I already spent so much money on this house. He did the pool. He did things to make it safe. He signed up for security. Like, he's done all of this to keep her safe, and now she's booking appointments behind his back. Well, he's not telling her, well, I just can't afford it. So I guess we all got secrets, Wayne. So then he gets a voiceover, and, he wants her to feel safe, but she just got there, and it just makes no sense to him. Also, we find out that the first time she visited or stayed there, his business was doing great. He was flourishing. But then he lost his biggest contract for a company that gave him 8 or 9 jobs a day. And she kind of knows what happened, but he hasn't told her how bad it's gotten. She just wants Wayne to understand, she's from a safe country. She's used to being able to jog in the cemetery at night. She's a woman after my heart, I'll tell you what. I actually have a long history of hanging out in cemeteries, especially when I was a teenager. So I wasn't up to no good. I was just hanging out. Anyway, he's like, I've tried to tell you that was there. This is here. Like, even the gated communities aren't safe. His friend got shot in a gated community right through the fence. Like, nowhere is safe. And she's like, why can't we just go look? He tells her, moving is expensive and it's not cheap. And she's like, you've never brought that up to me. She doesn't know how his money works, and she needs to know all that if she's going to get incorporated to living there. And he's like, yeah, well, you should have done that before you agreed to marry me. Like, listen, sir, she hasn't married you yet, so she can still go home with her mama any day now. At least she's asking you before she marries you. Like, most people don't even do that. And she's like, wow. I just said look at houses. She didn't know he would get all psycho about it. And, he tells her she needs to understand how things work in South Africa. And he's just, being an ass. He has like a terrible tone. He's just like condescending and passive aggressive. And in her interview, she says no one can understand what she's given up and everything that comes with it, unless they've been through the same thing. She has no independence there. She's so reliant on him, without a gated community, she's just not going to feel safe there. I don't know how she keeps talking to him after these scenes where he talks to her like this. But, she does. And she's like, I just want to look at some places. I've been open-minded. I've sacrificed a lot coming here. He's like, you're right. You're right. You did sacrifice everything. So let's go and look. But he said it in that same, like, defensive ass tone. And she's like, I'm not saying we have to move. He tells her, no, it won't hurt to look, and he's going to keep an open mind, and maybe he'll even like the place. Who knows? He says in the interview, he can't move until the financial situation changes, but he feels like he's taking everything away from her. She's compromising and considering going to look with her, like, that's all right, he could do that. He hopes it'll get them back on track. Who knows? She's kind of not buying it with how she's looking at it, but says, okay. We'll see more of that next week. This guy, though, wow. He is very, like, defensive and passive aggressive, and most of these men on here just aren't forthcoming with their situation. Like, us women aren't just completely unreasonable and have completely unreasonable expectations. Like, just be honest with us and, we'll work with it. We'll help you. In fact, we'll probably help you fix the problem and get a solution. But no, he's not going to do that. So, yeah, let me know what you guys think about Wayne and Holly. I just feel like she's got to be, like, is it anemic? She's very pale. And they treat her like she's a child, or like she can't make a decision, and she lets them. So, yeah, that's what I think. Let me know what you think. All right, guys, 3rd episode in a row. I'm going to need you to grab your tissues. We're going to talk about Kenny and Armando. So, as we know, Armando really wants a baby. Today they're off to the surrogacy clinic so they can find out everything about it. That way they can make a decision. Kenny has been back and forth a lot about wanting a baby. Having a baby at 60 is a big deal. He'll be 66 when he goes to school and 79 when they graduate. and, in his 80s when they get married. So they get to the clinic. The lady welcomes them. She gives them the folders. She says they've been there 7 years, and they've worked with a lot of same-sex couples. They also have like 85 babies. And they do the whole process in that clinic. They create the embryos, choose the egg donor there, give the sample from the men there. Then they create the embryos. Kenny asks if all the surrogates are Mexican, and all the surrogates are Mexican from Mexico City, and they've all been moms with healthy pregnancies. But then they say, the egg donors are from all over the world. Germany, America, Mexico. And they travel there to donate their eggs. And I thought that was very interesting because I think even when they asked that, like, when I think of a surrogate, I think, like, of them donating the egg. Like, I forget that they can take, like, an egg from me and then go put it in another woman to have the baby type of thing. I just haven't thought of that. So, yeah, they could get any nationality or race they would like. Kenny says that 30 years ago when he wanted to have children, as a gay man, he went through in vitro process. It was new at the time, and his friend had offered to do it with him. But he says it was very difficult. Back then, you couldn't be single or gay. So he wore a big old wedding ring to all the visits, and they deceived a little. But Kenny wanted children, and he was going to make it happen. Then they ask, how much does the whole process, getting the surrogate and everything, cost? And it cost $72,000. Ouch. But she does say that it's very economic compared to the States. And then we find out, once they start the process, they can have the baby in 1.5 years. And Armando just looks so happy, like he's on top of the world. Kenny starts feeling all that pressure of the world. He's got a big decision here because it's life-changing. But if he decides he doesn't want a baby, it's going to crush Armando's dreams. So they have a lot to discuss. They go to a coffee house. Armando is just exhilarated at the possibility of having a baby and how easy it's going to be. Like, he's over the moon. He's ready to make babies. Kenny starts off with saying how nice the people were. And, Armando, he said he learned a lot after hearing about the whole process. And he's excited. He wants to move forward with it. Kenny looks like he is sweating. And he tells Armando, he goes back and forth on it a lot. Kenny starts crying. He thinks he's too old for this. Armando's like, well, you think you're too old. Like, you think you are too old, that you can't, or you just don't want to because of your age. And he's just worried that is it the right thing to do? What if he has a little baby and something happens to him when they're like 5 or 6 or 8? And it's just something he has to think about. And it all just kind of like hit him. Armando's like, well, we have talked about all of these things, your age and all of that stuff. So it's not just hitting you right now. Kenny is worried about like what he's going to miss. He doesn't know what's going to happen in the next 20 years, but he knows that he would never see, this child's children. And Armando isn't understanding that. He just tells him, he's just feeling fear and uncertainty. And that's why adoption, even though it's a far-fetched option, would be better because they can get an older child. And Kenny would just feel better about that. Armando's frustrated because they did go to an adoption agency. And there they found out the whole process takes years. Like, they showed the lady telling them they just had an adoption that took 4 years for the whole process. And he knows that surrogacy is possible in Mexico City, and it's like a much quicker process. Armando tells Kenny, like, he wanted to do this because he loves him as a dad and as a parent, and he wanted to share that with him. You know, he says they can't keep pushing this back. Like, it's time to make a decision. And Kenny just doesn't have an answer today. And he's asking Armando to respect him on that, because they're talking about, like, they're not talking about something simple, like, where are we going for vacation? And Armando, you know, he's like, oh, so I'm disrespecting you. He tells him that's unfair to say, and he just needs a moment. He says Kenny knows, like, that isn't the case. Outside, you know, now we got Armando starting to cry. Kenny's interview, he says this is a big decision he could make, you know, and it's got to be the right one for everyone involved. He doesn't want to break Armando's heart, so he doesn't know what to do. Armando is kind of feeling like he's been misled, that, you know, Kenny's saying no and trying to twist it that he's, like, not saying no. Like, I'm not saying no, but let's still see. And Armando just feels heartbroken. He has been, you know, so understanding of Kenny. And Kenny just shouldn't say that he's disrespecting him. That's just unfair. So Kenny goes outside. Armando's still talking to the crew. Kenny grabs his hand, asks him to walk with him. And I'm like, I'm going to cry, you guys. Like, oh. Kenny hugs him. You know, Armando looks like he doesn't want to, but he still wants to, you know, and hugs him anyways. Kenny's crying. He doesn't want to fight. Armando doesn't either, but, you know, he's had patience with him. He's asking him if he's been stringing him along, like stringing him in the wrong direction, making him believe something is going to happen that just isn't. Like, just tell him no, and he can be upset for a while, and just, you know, tell him he doesn't want to do it. Kenny asks him, like, you honestly think I would string you along? And, you know, Kenny feels like Armando feels like he's not being honest. And Kenny doesn't feel like that's fair either. He said, you know, he doesn't think he's disrespecting him. He wants him to respect how he's feeling about being unsure. So, you know, he's like, we got the info and now a discussion. You know, the decision doesn't need to be made today. And, you know, it's not going to take us 6 more months to get there either. But he can't make a decision this second. And he wanted to tell him how he feels. You know, he's very excited and very worried. And he's like, you know, people do that sometimes. And then Armando starts crying again. Like 3 episodes now, I've had to watch this amazing person cry. Like, I just want to give him a hug. I know everybody goes through hard things, though. So, Kenny says he hates disappointing him, and they hug and they cry together. So, I had a couple thoughts here. And at first, I was thinking, like, they do raise a kid together. You know, Hannah. And I know Kenny isn't her parent, and they didn't, like, decide to have her together. But she did have her mom pass away, and Kenny has been there for a few years. I know they addressed it before, like, why they would want another child together that isn't Hannah. But I can't quite remember. I think Armando wanted to use, like, Kenny's DNA, so he had a part of Kenny always. Something like that. And I think that Kenny being the one to donate the sample is what he is, like, wrestling with. Like, maybe if they changed it. And I don't know this for sure, who they want to use. But from my memory, I thought it was Kenny's. So, maybe if they changed it to, like, using Armando's, then Kenny would feel a little differently. I'm not sure. But I can also see why Armando is frustrated. Because Kenny's not saying yes or no. And he's been doing that for years. They've been talking about having a baby since like right before they got married, they were telling his kids about the possibility. So we got to make a decision. And I really think that Kenny deep down doesn't want to, but he doesn't know how to say it. And I understand what he's saying. It is kind of irresponsible to be 60 making babies just because you can, because life is short. And, if you live to be 80, you're lucky. So, yeah. I just feel bad for these guys. It's so hard to watch. Not in a bad way, in a way that it makes me emotional and I tear up. Maybe it's just one of those days. Okay, guys, moving on from that, let's talk about Julio and Kirsten. They get into the car, and she does not look happy. She gives him like a half a kiss, and he's like, well, what's that? Give me a real one. And she's like, give me the Wi-Fi. So, in his interview, he says, taking her to the airport today, and the mood is just like crickets. He says the trip didn't go how he wanted because of the fights and the arguments they had. It's made him question things more. And, she asked if he's happy she was there. And of course he was happy, she could experience part of his life. She says also a lot of fights. And, she thinks there are things they need to fix. And they're going to have time away from each other, so they'll have time to think. And she's aware. She knows they're going to have a lot of time away from each other. She's like, yeah, 3 months, right? And you're going to move? He says, that's the plan. That's the goal. She just says they have to fix a lot of things and looks away. He tells us that he's going to miss her. But seeing her in his world opened his eyes a little more and just highlighted some differences they have. And, he loves her and he hopes they can find a solution to the small fights and just be good. He says, when do we want to start looking at apartments? And she's like, I'm the one who has to. And he's like, well, why do you always say that? And she's like, I'm the one who has to do all the viewings. And he's like, yeah, but I've sent you some to look at. And he knows that she's the one who has to do it, but she doesn't need to remind him all the time. She makes it sound to him like he chooses not to be there, but he literally can't go to the viewings. She's like, well, you could FaceTime. He's like, look, you've only seen like 2 or 3 places. He says he was on FaceTime for one of them, right? And she's like, what? Don't lie to me now. He says he's not, and she's like, no, we were never on FaceTime. And he kind of was like, all right, okay, you're right. And she's like, are you serious? Like, do you want to argue right before I leave? And I gotta say, like, she was very closed off the whole car ride. And I would have been the same way, because he annoys me. I'm sure he was annoying. But, she started the argument. He was trying to be like reassuring, I think, that he's going to move there in 3 months. Like, oh yeah, let's start looking at apartments. Even though, he's a lying ass and he's having doubts and he doesn't want to tell her. So, I feel like she's also like upset she's leaving and scared. But she still is the one being like defensive and guarded in here. Like, no matter what he says in this car ride, he's not getting through to her. And, she just can't believe he's acting like such a jerk. And she just feels things are off between them. And she just wants to go back to how things were. She's never seen this side of him. And she just hopes it gets better when he moves there. They arrive at the airport. They're sad. I think he says bittersweet. And, he thanks her for coming. And she says, of course. Like, she just can't believe she won't see him for 3 months. She does say it was nice to meet his family and friends and see his life. And he says he wishes, he could spend more time with her. They hug. They say their I love yous. He, promises to see her in 3 months. They even do the official pinky promise. She says she's gonna miss him even though, like, he disappointed her a lot. And she still loves him and has hope. Now, she didn't say that last part to him. She told us that. So, she says, they've put a lot into this, so she's gonna fight for this relationship. And that's where we left him this episode. Do we think Julio's gonna move there? Let me know what you think. I don't think he's gonna move there in 3 months. I think it'll take longer, and he'll probably blame paperwork or something. Okay, guys, last couple. Thank you for sticking around this far. If you have, make sure to like the video, please. Thank you. So, we got to talk about Kimberly and TJ, but it's actually pretty much Kimberly and Yash until the end. So, where we picked up is Yash calling Kimberly stupid at the end of last episode. And she's like, do not call me stupid because I am not. And he's like, okay, you are the wisest person in the world. Are you happy now? And she's like, no, because you're being a smartass. Then he calls her Einstein. And he's like, and tells Einstein to listen. He wants her to understand what he's trying to say. She understands what he's trying to say, but he needs to understand that, like, this is constricting to her. Like, do you understand that? She says, are you the stupid one? She's like, typical Virgo, controlling, thinks he knows what's right, pompous, and arrogant. Didn't she say she was a Virgo? I think that's funny because I have a Virgo child, and then I have a Virgo little brother. And I wouldn't call them that. I would say Virgos are practical, homebodies, value, like money and material wealth. Anyway, so Kim wants him to understand she's not going to sacrifice like every bit of herself to be with TJ. TJ also needs to compromise. He asked her, like, what's the meaning of marriage? And she's like, well, it's a partnership in my country. And, apparently in theirs, it is not. And then he says there are more culture and manners in India. And she's like, sorry, I blanked out for a second. I can't believe I had to say that. I think there's culture anywhere you go. Like, who is this guy? Like, why would he say such things? Anyway, she's like, you've never been to America, so if he wants her to respect his culture, he needs to respect hers. He, like, disregards what she had just said and is like, why do you love TJ? She's like, everything about him. He gets all loud. Everything means everything. If he tells her not to cook garlic or do something else, like, it's okay to compromise on a few things because he's also compromising. It's not a competition, He's like, make him king and he'll make you a prince. And I was like, does that mean give her a son? Like, he'll make a prince for you? Like, I had no idea what this man's talking about. Like, shouldn't it be queen? And anyway, she's like, he's already a king and she doesn't want to be a prince or a boy. And he's like, queen, sorry. And then, like, slaps her leg, like playful, not like smack, but like, haha. And she's like, please don't touch me. He's like, you can't talk to me this way. And she's like, I said please. And I'm like, so she can't tell him not to touch her? So she's like, if you want me to say don't effing touch me, I'll say that. But I didn't say that, did I? And he's like, I forgave you for the one mistake you did the other day. And because of TJ, I was silent. And then he says something about all she cares about is dramatic love. And, that will only have drama in her life. And she's like, whether you like it or not, I love TJ. And he loves me too. And he says he doesn't care. He just wanted to make things simpler. She's like, no, you want me to change and morph all my beliefs to your beliefs. And that's not going to happen. And he says, I don't care about you. And she knows. And she doesn't care about him either. But she's doing it for TJ. He says, it isn't for TJ. And she's like, yeah, it is. I hate India. He's the reason I'm here. He's the reason I have to put up with you and deal with your parents. And he's like, it's mutual. TJ is why we're tolerating her and garbage over their head. And then she's like, yeah, it takes trash to know trash. He's like, TJ's gonna have to leave you if he wants to have a happy life. Then she just laughs in his face. He starts mocking her laughing. And she's like, if he's not happy with himself as he is, he won't be happy with or without me. Whether he's with me or on his own. She can't make him happy. And then he says, like, yeah, you can't make him happy. And she's like, obviously, I just said that. He tells her that she doesn't deserve love, and she says he doesn't either. Apparently, she abused TJ and his family, and if she doesn't respect them, get out of their house. She says he has no idea who she is and just walks away. She's here, she loves TJ, she wants to spend her life with him, and if that's in India, she's just gonna suck it up. But it does need to be addressed that she feels she has no say, and she's sure, that's not gonna change when she gets married. She's never, ever going to be like them. And she's standing her ground, to be who she is, and Yash is just going to have to deal with that. He is over there talking, and he says, no one would have agreed to this marriage if TJ hadn't been so adamant. But the way that Kim is, he's never going to be in favor of this marriage. He can't handle her, and basically she's got to go. She's got to go. Later that night, it's nighttime, TJ is telling his brother he needs to come outside. Sorry. He's like, we're going to go to a nearby shop to discuss what had happened earlier today. He's like, is this necessary? TJ's telling us earlier, he was at work. Kimberly texted him and said she had a fight with Yash. He's concerned about the future because apparently Yash and TJ are going to be roomies for their entire life. Even after they get married. They're just all going to live there in a couple's hacienda. So, they need to solve this issue, or 20 years from now, there's just going to be no peace. I think it's cute that he thinks that she's going to make it living there for 20 years with his parents, his brother, and his brother's wife. But, okay. Kim feels like Yash had the most control in his family. He's outspoken and hot-headed, and that just makes her worried. She's getting married in 6 days and doesn't want that kind of, hatred in the air. TJ asks his brother, what happened? And he says, she's very fearful of the rules and that there's going to be too many boundaries. And her concern is not being able to express herself or be accepted who she is. She's telling them that, if they believe something, it doesn't mean that she has to. He tells TJ that he told her they both need to compromise, and that's the only way the marriage will work. TJ asks for the floor. He's like, both of you have different perceptions. Yash tells her it's her life, she can eat what she wants, wear what she wants, go where she wants. That's her decision. But if it's hurting someone else that she loves, it's going to affect their relationship. And then he says, Kim thinks she's the sun and everything revolves around her. She's independent and will do things according to her. TJ is like, well, that's your position. But you're the one over here getting more riled up than she is. he's like, she's pretending to be calm, which is probably true, because she was arguing over stupid things, he says. TJ says, well, they might be stupid things to you. And he's like, you don't want a conclusion to this? You just want to live like this for 50 years? Like, no thanks. So they need to come to a conclusion. He interrupts TJ and is like, she keeps doing it. TJ's like, listen to me or go home. It's like a bunch of little kids arguing in adult bodies. So he sarcastically is like, okay, it's resolved, Kim. Let's cheers. We don't have any issues. Are you okay with it? And she's like, no, not the way you're acting. No. He's like pretty much like almost yelling at her, being very aggressive with her. And she hasn't really said much because now her man's is there to do it. And he's like, from my side, it's resolved and he has no grudges. And she tells him that's fine. He tells TJ, like, look at her attitude. And he's like, bro, you also have an attitude. And she did say it was like a great relief to feel like TJ has her back. So she wants him to feel like they could be the family that he wants. But if this is what it's like, it's not going to happen. Then, Yash was clearly lying about no grudges because he's like, her life revolves around her only. Individuality, liberty, freedom. And then I'm thinking like, well, isn't liberty and freedom the same thing? Similar. I hope I'm not wrong. That would be embarrassing. But I'm like, okay. He's like, that's not how family works. And I'm like, okay. So she's like, the reason these are important to her are like they're taught to be happy. Then TJ just like cuts her off, so I have no idea what she's trying to say. And she's like, I know, I'm just trying to explain. And then Yash jumps in and says like, even aliens want to be happy. You are not like God. And I'm like, what does that have to do with anything? And then TJ is looking at him like, what is wrong with you? Like, you're acting like the stubborn one here, is what he tells him. She says she can't control other people's feelings, but she can express her truth. And Yash tells her, like, he's like, oh, okay, now add more tears. He gets in his interview and says he feels like Kim's manipulating things. But after this conversation, he's just going to start blaming TJ. Because as the English say, you can bring a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. TJ isn't doing his job, bringing his horse to the water. So I think Kim is the horse. She doesn't agree with their culture or family, so he needs to at least tell Kim, like, he or she may be wrong. Apparently, TJ was just blaming Yash for everything. TJ just always thinks Kim is so awesome, but she's just not for their family. TJ's like, if you keep acting like this can't be resolved. He's like, Kim doesn't deserve any respect or love from him or his parents. And TJ's like, oh, so you're deciding for your mom and dad now. And, gathering his people to his side. Yash is like, I'm the bridge in this family. And then at this point, I'm starting to get like Yash is like Scar from The Lion King, and TJ's Mufasa. Like, he just gives me Disney villain vibes. It's probably too much of a compliment for all the things he said about my culture, right? So he's like, if you have a problem with her, tell her and she can fix it. And he says, she's not going to listen, which is true. TJ gets upset. He starts cussing. He's just trying to resolve the issue. Yash is like, I'm out of here. He doesn't want to discuss it. He walks away. Like, he was very on guard the whole time. Like, nothing really got brought up about the argument or what either of them said to each other. Like, he's talking about her being abusive. He's being abusive to her. In my opinion, like, the things he says about her, her culture, her beliefs, how she thinks, telling her she doesn't deserve love or respect or anything. Those are awful things to say to a person. She was sitting there playing innocent in front of TJ, but I think, it was clear to her that this was a talk between the brothers. And, they didn't even get far enough for her to say or apologize for anything. Anytime she spoke, like even that one time she tried to explain, TJ cut her off. So I think she was sitting there trying to act like she didn't do or say anything wrong, but she didn't have a chance to hold up to accountability for any of those things because they didn't get past the she's not going to just fall in line and do whatever I say part. So, as far as Yash saying he's done with grudges, we could all see that was a lie. So there's that. And I think he also doesn't want to lose control over his family. They do have very strong beliefs, and I think he's an older brother, and I'm just guessing if the hierarchy is like that, like him and his wife will be above TJ and his wife, or something. And now he thinks like, oh, Kimberly's going to bulldoze my traditional Indian wife or something. I don't know what this man's thinking, but he is really rude and disrespectful for someone who's like acting like someone else is and like wants someone to just respect and, like fawn over his culture and just fall in line. But he's going to talk about her and her culture like that. Yikes. Every episode, they're fighting. We always end with one of these men storming off on this woman or her storming off on them or something. So, but I mean, they're an exciting couple. I definitely want to keep watching that train wreck. Let me know what you guys think about them. I am going to hopefully start 90 Day UK this weekend. That's my plan for tonight and tomorrow night, to start watching that and hopefully get something recorded. Not 100% how I'm going to lay it out, but it's going to be good. So hopefully you guys stay tuned for that, and I will definitely catch you soon. Also, don't forget to take deep breaths and take care of yourself, and go get a massage or something. That sounds real nice. So I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.